Great. Alrighty. So welcome everyone to the SSP Project Management workshop. We're really excited to be able to facilitate this again. Really aware that the first time we ran it last Friday, we weren't, well not last Friday, Friday before, we weren't expecting to have so much interest. So we're really glad to have been able to put this on another time and to be able to be doing this as a recording as well. My name's Naima. I'm a member of the Student Staff Partnership team over in the Student Employability Centre, and I'm one of the project officers who help support students and staff in navigating their projects. And I'll hand it over to my other team members to introduce themselves.
My name is Julia. I'm a project officer in the SSP team as well. I work with Naima and Madeleine Marie. Yeah, and I won't be talking that much today, but I'll try to paste the relevant links in the chat feature for you to access some online platforms for the activities.
And my name is Madeleine Marie. I work with Naima and Julia in the Student Staff Partnerships team at UQ. And just prior to this position, I've worked as a project manager at a couple of different universities and was really fortunate to work on a few research grants as part of the Australian Government Office for Learning and Teaching in the areas of employability as well as student experience. So thank you all for joining us today.
So just to flag, we have a lot of content to get through. So we're going to try our best to get through it all, but also still make sure that you have plenty of time to run through those activities and actually get hands-on with those tools. But before we get really into it, I really want to take this time just to acknowledge that all of the spaces where we are today, whether it be in our rooms or out in our dining room tables, sitting in our gardens, or even, sitting out in a different space, that these spaces have always been places of learning and collaboration and community, and to take that time to reflect on all of the history that has always been in those spaces. Just really like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodians of those lands, and would like to encourage you all to keep that in your minds, or as we continue to collaborate in this workshop. So welcome. As I mentioned before, we've got a fair bit to get through. So essentially we've got 5 different parts. This first part will be looking at the overview of what is project management, sort of kind of debunking some of the myths around, some of those traditional thoughts of what project management. Also, only half of the screen is half seen. Is anyone else having any troubles with only seeing half of my screen? No? Okay. You mean my camera screen, John? Sorry, I'm working off multiple monitors at the moment, so.
Yes, your own screen, I cannot see the full screen. I'm seeing half of the screen.
Okay, I will try my best to read. Great. So yeah, that's a good idea, Mads. What we might do is, John, we might share the slides. Let me see some of the screen too. So just to clarify, do you mean the slides? That you can only half see the screen?
Yes, the slides.
Okay, cool. Alrighty, so in that case, the word management. Let me just try one thing. Cool. Alrighty, so at the moment,
I think it's okay like this. It's okay, we can see the full slides now.
Alrighty. Is that better for people? So
Pardon?
for now, okay, sorry about that, people. I haven't had that issue before, so have to look into it. Let me know if you have any issues accessing it or viewing it, and can definitely try to improve it. Okay, so yeah, just going back to that, in terms of that workshop structure, we'll be doing an overview of what project management is. We'll also be taking some time around how do you assemble a project team, and then in part 3, we'll be looking at developing the project idea and how do you go about planning that and keeping on top of those tasks. We've got a part called the sprint, which will make more sense in a second, and we'll then be looking at how do you tie up the project and looking beyond the project. Alrighty, so as we're going to move into an activity now, and so I encourage you all to go to Slido. I'm just going to have to do it slightly differently since I'm not accessing it from the slides, because usually it would populate the slides straight away. Present mode. Cool, so what I'd encourage you to do is to go to slido.com and enter in this code, and you should be presented with a question of, in 1 to 3 words, what is project management to you? And so what we might do is take just a couple of minutes as we encourage you to enter in a few words, or encourage you to enter in a few words of what project management is to you. And let me know if you have any troubles accessing that. Or any troubles viewing it. Awesome. So we've got some things coming through like leadership, communication, meeting deadlines, fairness, doing a project effectively. To figure out that, let me know. Coordinating and leading a project, collaboration. It's interesting. So as part of our initiative that the 3 of us work on, collaboration really sits at the heart of student staff partnership projects. And sometimes, traditional forms of project management can be kind of seen as that sort of like top down, delegating tasks, but it can be, I guess, it can be really amazing when you start to draw upon people's skills and interests and areas of expertise, and to collaborate together to be able to bring something more. Time management also a very important part, and also really tricky as well, particularly with the bigger that your team becomes. It can be really challenging to find ways to make sure that you're all on the same page, as well as manage all of those tasks. Mads, do you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, and I think and I absolutely loved that you've included those things such as leadership and collaboration, because at a prior role I was hired as a project manager, and one of the first things that my boss had said to me was, you're actually, despite the fact that on your position description you're a project manager, we're throwing that out the window, because immediately some of the words that come to mind when we talk about project management includes like delegation, and that's really not what we were looking to do. We were looking more so to be influencing others and to be bringing others on board, and that does require more leadership abilities than management, as Naima was discussing earlier as well. One of the things which links to coordination as well, it was funny, there was a staff member ages ago and he said it's kind of like herding cats, trying to herd cats, which can definitely be a big challenge. But I think, you know, if you can herd those cats in the end, what you're able to produce is so much more powerful if you bring people along the journey with you as well.
Managing human resources, yeah, really standing out. And so I think as we're moving into the rest of the workshop, I think we might just highlight that I guess we come from a very particular lens of project management, one that really stems around collaboration and leadership and bringing people's areas of expertise and interest together. And to acknowledge that, you know, there are other you know, forms of project management, and that I guess throughout this workshop, this is what we'll be really talking about. So thanks everyone for contributing to that. Alrighty, I might hand over to Matt.
Amazing. And that was a beautiful transition, Naima. So very much to acknowledge that there are so many different methodologies or approaches for engaging in managing projects. Back in the day, I was working on a research project, and I went to this meeting where there was some like super fancy project managers, and I was like fresh out of university and, you know, a little bit green, and I was just super excited. And I went around this table and they said, oh, what project management methodology do you deploy? And I was like, I don't know, I just, you know, get stuff done. So that kind of became my ongoing mantra that I still use today. It's very much about getting stuff done. But in that previous job that I was talking to you about, it really opened up my eyes when in one of my first meetings that I ever had, a colleague came by and said, have you ever heard of Agile project management methodology? And it sounded a little bit like a cult, to be honest, at the very beginning. But what I soon discovered, especially since, you know, it was the methodology we had to use, was that it was a really powerful way to get people from diverse experiences and expertise on board as well. Again, recognizing that, you know, there is no one source of truth, but if we all get the people that we need to have in the room, you can actually create a lot more, some resources that are a lot more powerful. So another thing to also flag and note is that there are very different approaches to Agile project management methodology as well. This is just how I've engaged with it in the past. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a diagram there, and it kind of shows you what are some, at a high level, what are some of the steps when you're deploying this methodology. So firstly, it's assembling the team, identifying what are the particular parts of expertise and experience that you want to or need to involve in a project. So for instance, I'll just use some situated experiences from my own past. I was collaborating with colleagues to develop a suite of resources for students and academics about the graduate attributes. Really fun, exciting stuff. And we identified that we needed skills and expertise in terms of like video production, as well as multimedia design, website design, as well as reaching out to the broader university community. So we brought people on board that actually wanted to be involved in the project, but also had those areas where I had significant gaps, as my team would very much attest to in terms of technology. So the first step is assembling the team, identifying the different types of expertise that you require. But even if you get halfway through the project and you've identified that you do have a skills gap, then you can definitely still bring those people on board. You're not necessarily locked into the team that you have. The next step is, as a team, to start fleshing out what the project's going to look like. So rather than the project manager saying, this is what you're going to do, actually bringing everyone in the room and saying, what do you want your outcomes to look like? Because everyone has something, you know, incredibly powerful to contribute. So say, for instance, I came up with the idea to have a website. I mean, I don't know all the specifics and how long that would take and so forth. So it's really important that that person that has that experience is in the room to make those decisions. Then you have these things that Naima alluded to earlier called sprints. Now, basically at its most simplest form, it's like, it generally goes for about 4 weeks. You can divvy up and you can make the sprints longer, you can make them shorter, depending upon whatever works for your team. But it's like a high intensity time where you work on a particular task. So say, for instance, you said, okay, in the next 2 weeks, that's the sprint, that's the duration of the sprint that we want. I want to create the draft slides for this project management workshop that we're creating. So say, for instance, Naeem has decided to go off and do that. So she works for those 2 weeks on those slides. And at the end of those 2 weeks, she sends through the slides to Julia and myself. And then we kind of, in the nicest possible way, rip it apart, say, these are the gaps, this is what we could potentially do. And we all contribute to making it an even better outcome. Then in the next sprint, the next 2 weeks, Naima takes on all that feedback and goes, okay, what am I going to prioritize based upon my current workload to fix? And there might be areas that she goes, well, actually, I completely disagree with Mads on this, so I'm not going to prioritize this. And then, so basically, rather than Naima just going out and spending the next 6 months creating what might be an amazing workshop, she's slowly, bit by bit, drafting things and always bringing it back to the team so that they can kind of, in the nicest possible way, rip it apart and provide feedback and recommendations. Now, that is where really divide and conquer is coming in, because in a particular sprint, you might have people that go off and do things and then come back. In a sprint review, that's generally where you have all of your team members as well as your stakeholders, which we'll explain in a little bit, around the table providing feedback on ways in which you can improve whatever you're creating. So basically with your sprints, it goes in a continual loop. So say, for instance, your project goes for 2 months, you might have like 8 sprints during that 2 months where you're just continually revising things. And then at the very end of your project, you have what's called a retrospective. So you all come back together again, the stakeholders as well as the team members, and basically unpack the whole experience. How could you have worked more collaboratively together? What were some of the shortfalls? But then also just kind of reflecting on what were, you know, some of the great things that were able to eventuate from your project as well. Okay, so this next part, we're going to be giving you some lessons learned and some good tips about how to effectively assemble the team. And then towards the end, we'll also have a fun activity for you as well. Okay, so I've talked about these different groups of people. So I couldn't find a nicer graph for this. So if anyone has a better way to visualize this, please, I would love the feedback. But I kind of separate it into 3 groups. The first one, which is the bigger circle, is called the project team. So those are those individuals that I was explaining before that have particular skills and expertise. Sorry to sound a little bit actually like Liam Neeson, but particular skills that can contribute to delivering or developing that product or that resource that you're looking to create. So those are the doers, the people that work on the project. You also have stakeholders, and they provide constructive, hopefully, feedback on ways in which you could improve. And you've got to be really specific in terms of what do you want from your stakeholders. Is it just to provide feedback, or is it to help connect you with other people that you might need to be connected to? So stakeholders would sit, for instance, in those sprint review meetings that you'd have at the end of your individual sprints, and they'd help you pick apart and identify ways that you can improve your outcomes. And finally, you have some projects, not all projects, have gatekeepers as well. And they might be the decision makers that have to approve the product or the resource that you create. So for instance, in a past life of mine, we created videos as well as websites. And whilst we had the team that were the doers and got things done, and then we had stakeholders that were in each of the faculties so that we could ensure that our resources were suitable for people, for students and staff from all disciplines. It had to be approved by, you know, one of the senior executive members as well, to make sure that it aligned correctly as well to the overall governing policies and procedures. So at the end of the day, we could create these resources, but it had to be given the tick of approval from that gatekeeper. But not all projects will have gatekeepers. And Naima and Julia, feel free to add to that as well. Okay, so for this next part, I'll flick over to Naima. But just firstly, another really important thing to do is really identifying how do you find your team. And sometimes it can be really difficult because you don't know what you don't know. The team, us, our SSP, have identified some potential UQ collaboration partners that if you were doing a project here at the university might be suitable to engage in partnership with. So for instance, it might be people from, you know, individual clubs or societies that are relevant to the project that you're leading. Student representatives are also another great resource, and, you know, people to connect with, and as well as some of the central divisions, but then your faculty or school as well. And I think, you know, one of the most important things is, even if they might not partner with you on your project, they might connect you with another individual who you actually end up collaborating with, who you had never met before as well. So now Julia shared with you a link to a Google document as well. And because the wonderful Naima created this document, I think it's only fair that she run you through it as well.
So just to, in case people can't see the full slides, definitely recommend just going directly to the Google Sheets. But essentially, when you're doing a project and you sort of add those initial stages, trying to find people that you might want to collaborate with, it can be really useful to do like an audit of people that are already in this space. And so we wanted to share just one example of a template that, you know, I've personally used when I've been doing an audit of, you know, to try and find collaboration. And essentially this is particularly useful not only if you're doing a project by yourself, but if you're already, you know, got a bit of a project team going, because this is a way that where you can easily collaborate on one document together about all of the people that you may want to reach out to, and sort of also then keeping track of what's being communicated. So for example, like over on this more left-hand side with the blue and the purple, it's just, you know, who is it that you're wanting to talk to, and you know, what sort of role might they play in this project? Would they be an appropriate team member, a good stakeholder, or are they a necessary gatekeeper? And also just taking some notes about, you know, what they've done in this space and some ideas of how you might want to collaborate with them. And we've put those two columns in because when you're reaching out to those people, it can be a little bit daunting, you know, trying to figure out what it is that you're wanting to say to them. And I think something that, you know, I've personally learned is like sort of coming up with that elevator pitch. You know, what is it that, you know, kind of acknowledging, you know, what they've already done in this space, what you are currently working on, and then some ideas about how you might want to collaborate together. And I guess having that ask at the end of, is this something that you're interested in, or, you know, would you be able to help us with this? And so these two columns kind of act as a really good way, I guess, a foundation for what you might want to be talking to them about at that first conversation. Towards the right, in that yellow section, this is, I guess, probably where the heart of, you know, keeping track of this communication, because there's nothing worse than accidentally following up a person multiple times when somebody else has. And so this, having a document where people can collaborate together, makes it really clear about who's responsible for following up certain people, and also as like having all of those contact notes so that you're able to see what's kind of been kept in the loop of what's already been spoken about, and when there might be potential follow-ups. And this tries to help keep people accountable, and also just to, I guess, make sure that everyone's just on the same page, because I guess when you're collaborating, particularly in an online environment, it's so easy to be kept out of the loop because, you know, we're not just in the same space together and can have overhear those conversations happening or, you know, be part of those discussions. So I think this is one tool that or strategy that we've found to be useful to make it really transparent. So we've kind of locked this one just for sort of comments, but what we'll do is, you know, we'll send out, you know, just a template, you know, this template that's empty because this is just a made up, you know, details that we've made. And feel free, if you want to use this template for any future projects, change it up, make it so that it suits your needs. But just wanted to share a strategy that we find really useful in this space.
And sorry, Naima, you also received a question from Maureen, who asked, what is the links column for?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the links column, which is over here, is sometimes I've found when I'm contacting people is that it's really, sometimes there might be particular websites or pages that those people are associated with that I want to keep track of. A really good example is at UQ, we often have, sometimes there'll be, you know, research profile pages of particular academics, and that has some really useful information on there about how projects that we're trying to do may link with their study, like their interests or study areas. And so by having a column just for those links means that it's like really readily available for when I'm following them up or for writing notes and trying to come up with ideas. And so sometimes I actually have two links, like two columns for links. Sometimes it might be links that are directly associated with that person, but then also links that I've shared with them, you know, or the ones that I've, you know, thought might be useful for them. But that's something that I found to be really useful. No problem, Maureen. Alrighty. Cool. So usually we would take this time to actually send you out to some breakout rooms to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about, you know, why you came to this workshop. But because this is a recorded session, what we might do is encourage you to put in the chat just to introduce yourself and why you decided to come to this workshop, if there's a particular project you're working on or something that you're interested in. So we might just give a couple of minutes to allow you guys to add to that chat. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's also okay. Awesome.
One thing that I will mention, and thank you for those that are adding their thoughts, and I think it's particularly helpful for Naima, Julia, and myself as well, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that this workshop is as meaningful for you all as possible. And, you know, a couple of the resonant themes is really about like wanting to learn more about project management, if, you know, if you need it in the future. And one of the things that I would flag is even no matter what you're working on, even if you have project manager in your title, I think a lot of the skills and the abilities of project management and the approaches do come into play as well. So I would say even if you're not like a, you know, by trade a project manager, it is useful no matter what discipline you're in as well.
I think it's a really good point. I think a lot of these tools and strategies I wish I had you know, during my studies, because I think they would have been really, really useful for even just my normal assignments that I had, whether it just be writing an essay or doing a presentation.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, in the workplace, as you would all very much know too, it's, you know, a bit similar as per like a group assignment, in that you're all of a sudden thrown with people that, you know, you would never potentially have met before to work on a project, and you just have to, you know, and you might have very different understandings and opinions of the direction that you want the project to go, but you just, you know, have to make the best scenario out of it. But that being said, I think I work with the greatest team. I'm very, very fortunate to get to work with amazing people.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm just going to say thanks to everyone who's, you know, posted so far. Like I said, this has been also really useful for us to be able to contextualize, you know, what, you know, I guess any future examples and things like that. And yeah, it's great to hear about, you know, the group assignments. Actually, I've heard that there's a lot of group work in occupational therapy. Whole lot. I've also had a friend who was studying that, and so many group assignments. I think hopefully these tools will hopefully be useful for you guys, as, particularly as we're trying to collaborate, you know, online. I know that's definitely something that I'm continuously learning about. And also, if you know of any tools or strategies that have been really useful for you, please feel free to share. Highly encouraged. But I might take this time to move on to the next slide.
Of course. So in terms of stakeholders, sometimes they can be, you know, quite senior to you as well. And so what are some effective strategies to engage with them effectively? And I know in some previous projects that I've worked on, I've collaborated with some senior university executives, and it can be incredibly intimidating, and needing to, you know, develop that rapport as well straight away is quite a challenge. So in terms of some of the tips and tricks that, you know, we have learnt along the way, one would be really to acknowledge the idea, the creative ideas and the expertise that, whether it be your individual teammates or even your stakeholders, bring to the fore as well. So if someone comes up with a brilliant idea and you end up, you know, rolling that out, acknowledge them, not only one-on-one, but also more broader as well. One of the things that we did was inbuild celebrations as much as possible into every team meeting, especially when we had the stakeholders there as well. I would acknowledge the fantastic stuff, things that my teammates had done, and they would do the same thing as well. And I think it's really important for, you know, people to be acknowledged for their brilliant work as well, and it really develops an effective team culture. It's also really important to be super clear on what you expect from your stakeholders and your teammates, and vice versa. One of the things that I did in a previous project, again, because I had a super amazing team that were amazing with technology, was we just developed like a Google site, and I created like an organizational type chart. And then beneath that, I wrote the roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders versus the team members versus the gatekeepers as well. And in the organizational chart, I actually like named people as well. And that way people were really clear from the outset about, if they opted in to be a stakeholder, we would expect them to attend, you know, meetings every month, to connect us with people in their faculties or their schools, as well as to provide feedback on how we could improve the resources, but then also to let us know the wonderful resources that they had already created in that space as well. Because sometimes someone has already created something and you don't want to recreate the wheel as well. So it's really important to be quite clear about what you expect for them. But then also, you know, that's a negotiation. If they want to change it up a little bit, then work with them through that process. Also, if you say you're going to meet a deadline, and I feel like I've been terrible at this lately, as I'm sure a few of you can appreciate, but if you're going to say you're going to meet a deadline, then try your best to meet the deadline. And if you can't, just be transparent about that. So for instance, you know, I was supposed to follow up with someone, but something else fell through. So I just, you know, emailed them just to let them know what was going on, so they didn't think I was just ignoring them and it wasn't a priority. It's also really important to be flexible as well. So if someone can't attend your meeting, you know, do they want you do they want to meet with you one-on-one and provide you with that feedback? So just to, you know, ensure that you provide that space for them to provide that feedback or to have their insights and their perspectives heard, even if it's not at your formal meeting that's every month. And, you know, connected to something that I said before, it's just really important to, and again, I know you would all very much appreciate this, but, you know, to always close that feedback loop. If people are providing feedback, not only acknowledging that, you know, you've listened to them, but then to also respond to that feedback. So you might not be able to take, you know, all that on board at this stage, and to make those changes to your program or to, you know, the resource that you're developing. But as long as you're, again, transparent about that and why you can't, people are generally really understanding.
Awesome. Thanks, Mad. So I'm aware that, you know, that was a whole lot of talking and listening for that last half an hour. So I can promise that this next section is going to be a little bit more hands-on. And so we're going to be looking at some strategies that around like how do you develop that project idea, and a lot of this is around keeping track of tasks, and brainstorming ideas and mapping out people's skills and interests and finding solutions for keeping track of all the things that you're doing. So I guess this section in its whole is really looking at strategies for ensuring that everyone on the team can have input and influence. And I think this in itself also links to, you know, how do we set up strategies and tools so that we can have those challenging conversations. You know, I think a really great example is when you're trying to decide who's going to be taking responsibility over certain tasks, and you have two people who are both equally interested in leading a task, and no one wants to be that person of, you know, of trying to take over, or it's navigating that challenge. And so I think a lot of these tools and strategies that we're going to be using, which we're going to be utilizing a lot of different tools such as Jamboard and Padlet. These can be great to kind of break down those barriers so that people feel comfortable to be honest. And so I think we've kind of, I guess, touched upon those three different strategies, which is, you know, creating a space where people can be honest. And sometimes this is through allowing people to, using these platforms allows them to have a bit more of an anonymous response so that they can share their ideas. That other one was, first point, allowing time for personal reflection. So sometimes people aren't ready to share their idea on the spot. And so sometimes by taking just 5 or 10 minutes just to allow people to write down their ideas before sharing with the broader group can be a really useful tool. And then that last one around sharing the responsibility. Sometimes there are going to be times where there's going to be one person that needs to take responsibility or ownership, like leading a certain task. A really great example is moderating a team meeting. And yes, just to answer quickly, question, Maureen will be sending the slides around after an email, plus also links to all of these different activities and little how-to instructions. We're going back to that point around sharing the responsibility. I think, yeah, when you're trying to lead a team discussion, sometimes it's really useful to have one person moderating it. And so that, particularly in a Zoom environment, it might be like, oh, you know, Julia, what do you think? Nads, what do you think? Sarah, what do you think? So that people have kind of got that chance to respond, rather than, I'm sure we've all had it where on Zoom, you know, you put out the question and 3 people try to respond at the same time, and, you know, you can't hear any of the responses. So sometimes it's useful to have someone to take the lead, but what you can do is share that responsibility. So one day I might be responsible for leading that conversation, but tomorrow maybe it's Julia's going to lead the discussion, and on Monday Mads will take that responsibility. So when developing the project, something that one of the first stages that might be really useful is to brainstorm all of the outcomes or tasks that you might want to achieve as a team. Or if it's just for your own personal project, just brainstorming it all just down personally. And traditionally, when face-to-face, our team would use a idea car park. And so as you can see on the slide, this was actually a picture of my personal idea car park that I have in my room at the moment. But we would have a piece of butcher's paper and we would use sticky notes to brainstorm all of the ideas and tasks that we wanted to work on, or questions that we have. And obviously that becomes really hard in a virtual space. And so what we've done instead is to use a great platform, which is Jamboard. And Jamboard is a Google platform. So I guess just to flag that it comes with the sort of same restrictions as a Google Doc, which is you can only have up to 50 people on the Jamboard at a time, which is one of the reasons why we had to put a cap on our original workshop. The other thing is that you may not be able to use Jamboard for really sensitive information. So for example, I wouldn't be using Jamboard to brainstorm like the names of students or their student IDs, putting student IDs on this Jamboard. Instead, it's a great space for ideation of tasks and outcomes that we might want to achieve. And so what we're going to do is head over to Jamboard and
Naima.
Yeah.
I apologize. Before we go into that, we did receive a question. Is it a good option to allow team members of the group to select where they fit in well, or to assign it to them?
Oh, a good question. And I think Julie's put a great response of always to ask team members for their preferences, skills, and what they'd like to learn. And I think in a few more slides, we'll actually be going over one skill that might be useful for having that conversation, because sometimes, you know, delegation, I guess, can be quick, can be a really quick, easy solution. But I think the drawback of delegation is that people might not be motivated to do those tasks, or might be disappointed with the task that they've been delegated, might become resentful. And so by taking the time to engage in a conversation as a team can lead to people being much more engaged as a team and feeling responsible for their tasks and being okay, you know, with the tasks that they're doing. Even if they're on a task that maybe they weren't 100% pleased with, at least, you know, there's probably a reason why that maybe they decided to take that on. And maybe it's because they've got other tasks that they're really keen to do and they're taking up more time. So it's okay that they're doing this other one. So I think, yeah, it's really great to, if you can, to make space and time for that. So let's start, I guess, yeah, an activity, which we've created a Jamboard, and it should pop you up to the first page. And I guess just to give you a little bit of an introduction to Jamboard, on your left-hand side, you've got all of your different tools. So you can use pens to draw little scribbles, and you can change the color of that, as well as your handy eraser. But what's probably most useful is the sticky notes, which allows you to add ideas or add sticky notes. And John, I will be with you in 1 second. I'll just finish going through this little how-to. The other thing that you can do is add an image. We find sometimes it's really useful to add like symbols. So one thing that we commonly do is use adding a heart or a star to, you know, showcase when we really, really like an idea, and add that to the page. And also you can add multiple whiteboards to this page. So for example, we've got another slide on number 2, which I'd encourage you all to go to, which has a little pink sticky note which says, what are some tasks or outcomes that you are working on? And I would love over the next 5 minutes for you to add your own sticky notes to that page of what are some tasks that you are hoping to achieve or outcomes that you are hoping to achieve on projects. And whilst you're doing that, John has also just asked if one of the group member is default, how can team leader address such a situation? So John, just to make sure that I'm on the right page, do you mean if one of the team members is automatically, like their role is to do a certain task, how can a team leader address, you know, kind of making sure that people are doing the tasks. Is that correct? Have I interpreted that question? Yeah, okay. So it's a good question. It can be really challenging when people have come into the team with set expectations. And yeah, it can be really difficult if you've got, you know, coming into that team with set expectations. And I guess one strategy, that we've been lucky enough in our own team is to acknowledge that maybe it's okay if these titles change or these responsibilities change. So for example, us in the student staff, 3 of us, student staff partnership team, we actually dedicated a whole, day actually to have discussions about how do we want to work as a team. You know, acknowledging that, you know, there are some things that, you know, we have to be responsible for. So for example, Madeline Marie, as the advisor of the team, she is often responsible for a lot of the reporting aspects of the program. But I guess something that's really great is that she still also, you know, if it's something that we're interested in, still asks for our input and asks, you know, if, you know, for how we can contribute to that. And so I think even when people do have, more stricter job titles, you can still engage people in collaboration and if they would like to. So, John, let me know if that answered your question. Happy to elaborate further, perhaps on a different activity. But in the meantime, maybe I'm just going to take 5 minutes to start adding to that second Jamboard, which you can see most of you are. We've still got a few people over on the first page, so feel free to jump over into our second page. We've got an anonymous penguin who's still over on our first page. And feel free to add a sticky note of, things that a task that you're working on, or as Julia has said, it doesn't have to be a project, could be an assignment or a birthday party you're planning, because we're going to be using this for a different activity. No problem, Joanne. We'll be sending you out an email with all of these resources as well as the recording if you want to watch the rest of it. Oh yeah, so Maureen, in order to add some hearts, what you can do is go to the add an image, and one of the options is you can either upload or you can just do a Google image search. And so I usually just type in heart or star and select one of the images. Sometimes it never loads. Not 100% sure why. It could just be the file size, but I find that small little icons tend to work pretty well. And obviously, the more people that you have on a Jamboard, sometimes the slower it acts. Again, yeah, Google, I mean, I've got a Google account. It can be very, very useful. Nice. And the other great thing is that once you've got one heart or image, you can actually quickly duplicate it. When you select the image, there'll be 3 dots and you have the choice to duplicate it, which we use in our own team to you know, highlight anything that is really useful. Alrighty. So we're going to be coming back to this really soon, so keep up the tab. But I guess kind of leading into to John's discussion, and feel free to keep on adding to the Jamboard, is that conversation of how do you map out people's skills and interest to the outcomes or the tasks that you have. And like, you know, like we kind of mentioned before, this can be, you know, really challenging, particularly if people, you know, do have the same interests. I think you can sometimes see this in a group assignment when you get a whole bunch of people from occupational therapy who are all interested in occupational therapy. And so it can be hard to diversify, you know, kind of pull apart where do people want to take responsibility. And so this is where we highly recommend as to take some time to have a conversation and to really, I guess, create a safe space where people feel comfortable to say, I want to take the lead on that, or to acknowledge that maybe I'm not so interested in doing that task. So on the slides, kind of towards the right, I've taken a screenshot of a little bit of an example of a strategy that we've used in SSP. And the strategy has been used, is a color coordinating system. So we brainstorm all of the ideas and then we put our initials in either green, blue, or red next to each task. And this is to highlight, you know, how interested, you know, how much responsibility do we want to take for each of these tasks. So the green was, I want to lead this task, you know, whether, you know, being that main point of contact, keeping track of timelines and being sort of responsible for the task. Blue is, you know, I really am still keen to be part of the project. I'm still wanting to support it and still be involved in decision making, but maybe not part of everything. And that kind of pinky red was the just keep me updated. You know, don't need to be involved in everything, just keep me in the loop. And if you have a question, please feel free to reach out to me. And so we took, you know, on our Change Academy day, we actually took out, you know, a solid half an hour actually to do this. And we weren't talking, we just spent, you know, time just putting our own names next to things or initials. And so what we're going to, I'm going to encourage you guys to do is to do the same on our current Jamboard. And I guess got it somewhere, might just need to copy and paste it over onto our second board. Lead, support, and just keep me updated. So recognizing that, you know, we've all sort of put up our own individual tasks that we're currently working on. I'd like you to take some time to read what other tasks are up on this Jamboard on page 2 at the moment. And I'd like you to put a sticky note with your initials, either in a green, blue, or red, about hypothetically, how involved would you want to be in these different tasks? So I'm going to allow you guys to, once again, maybe take 5 to 7 minutes and just to start adding. Awesome. Thank you so much for, continuing to add to this. And I think now just sort of having a really bit of a look at this, it can seem really chaotic, and just want to also acknowledge that, there are plenty of other ways that you can do this. You could do it, for example, in a Google Doc and have a table of tasks and get people to write their names. But I guess this is just one strategy of using that color coordination symbol. Just helps to open and start that conversation. And I guess to show maybe what that conversation might look like is acknowledging where we have some, conflicts. So for example, this down the bottom, the talk to student representatives about gathering feedback. It's quite an easy one because we have MMJ who's, in green, who's really keen to take the lead, JG who's keen to support that program, that part of the project, and SM who just wants to be kept in the loop. And so that's sort of its nice little niche little kind of sub team that who's going to be leading it and what people's roles are. But one where it might get a little bit more complicated is, for example, up here we have, this hosting a fun virtual trivia board where we've got 3 people all in green. And maybe that kind of leads to the conversation of, is there a way for you to all kind of take a co-lead position? Or are there, hypothetically, maybe, for example, my initials are NC, maybe I've already got enough on my plate and maybe it's okay for me to step back and take a supporting position. And so I guess this sort of allows you to identify areas where you've got those sort of nitty-gritty conversations. And I guess that last one, that other area is this need to find other sponsors for events, where we've got NC and SM who have only said that they just want to be kept in the loop. Nobody's keen to take the lead. Nobody wants to be support. And so this sort of showcases a task that maybe no one's really interested in and no one really wants to do it, but because it might still be a crucial piece of the puzzle, allows you to have that conversation of, okay, how are we going to achieve it? And, maybe NC and SM, like, would you be okay in taking more of a leading role, or can you divide the task up so that not just one person is responsible for it? And this, strategy can then, I guess, allow to that conversation. And I guess going back to your point, John, of, it can sometimes take time to have that conversation, and it's definitely, takes more time than just delegating tasks. But this way it allows people to have input and influence over what they want to do and get the most out of the project. And, acknowledging that maybe also just because somebody doesn't have the skills, they might be really keen to still develop those skills and those, because they're interested in it. And so I guess really start to draw upon the expertise of the group.
And sorry, Naima, can I add something to that just very quickly? And so, for instance, if you do have that instance where 2 people have said, they've indicated pink that they just want to be kept in the loop, maybe think about 2 things. Firstly, is it a priority? And, is it something, as Naima said, that's like crucial as part of your project to complete? But then secondly, also think about the workload of everyone. If you're both absolutely, under the pump with work, it might have to be something that's postponed to a little bit later on, or if someone has some more time on their plate, they might then need to step up and take more of an active role.
I think it's a really, really good point. So hypothetically, you've come up with all of those tasks. You have an idea about who's going to be taking the lead on those tasks. The next part is, how do you keep track of it all? How do you keep track of what's happening and who's responsible for what and the deadlines? And so one, strategy that one tool that we use as a team is Asana. And so unfortunately, let me know how you go seeing this visually, just because I'm aware there was issues before with the PowerPoint, but we just wanted to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of what Asana looks like. Because I don't know about you guys, but when somebody introduces the idea of using a new tool, particularly online tool, I get a little bit nervous about using it because I don't know how it looks. I don't know if, is it going to take more time than what I'm already doing? And so we just wanted to take some time to, I guess, show you how we use Asana and how it might be whether, and to, I guess, showcase about whether it's maybe a useful tool for you and your projects. So this is sort of what Asana looks like. On the whole, you can kind of set it up so it looks differently. Also, just a flag that you can get a free account, but you can only have up to, I think, 15 team members in there. So, we're lucky that our team is only 3 people, so it works really well for us, but there may be other platforms that might be better for you, such as Trello, or other ones that might fit the scope of your project better. But this is Asana. And essentially up here, hypothetically, we're organizing a networking event. And so we're acknowledging that as part of this networking event, we have a few different major tasks, such as organizing catering, advertising the networking event, figuring out the structure or the run sheet, as well as evaluating the networking event. And so what's great is that you can add these new sections with any of those sort of like major tasks or outcomes that you might want to do. And underneath them, you can start to break it up into those subtasks. So, a really good example is this advertising the networking event where, you want to create a social media post, but you also need to get approval from marketing, and you want to reach out to certain faculties to see if they can advertise it through their socials and get approval, from Penelope to send an email to all UQ students with this information. And so this is a way to sort of see all of those subtasks that fit underneath advertising the networking event. What's even better is that you can then assign people those tasks and put a due date. And these are really easy to change if for some reason, hypothetically, this was created a little while ago and you go, actually, haven't had the time to do that task just yet, but I know that I'm going to have it done by next Tuesday, or something like that. And the other thing that it can be really useful for is when you click on the task, it sort of brings up all of these extra details. So if you want to, you can add a description to put more details about that specific task. Or you can even attach a link or a file. For example, this one, create a social media post for Instagram. You may want to even link it, to the place where you're wanting to post, or put up some examples of what you're interested in. And you can also start a conversation so that you can let people know, for example, I've just done a draft. Mads, do you mind taking a look? And so I can sort of put that comment, and Madeline Marie would get a notification about this task, and she would be able to go, oh, yep, Naima's, just done a draft. I can then, go in and, take a look and add some comments, and it's all sort of sectioned in within that task. So it makes it very easy to see comments particular to one task, because I don't know, my emails get flooded and it can be really hard to keep on track of multiple conversations. So this helps to really keep it down. And the other thing that can be useful is this My Tasks sections over the left-hand side, which allows you to, I guess, see all of the tasks that you're currently responsible for. Do flag, like this has a whole lot of my other tasks to do with other projects, but to give you a look, it sort of, showcases a few different tasks, and you can choose to filter it so that it's, things that are due first. And I guess that's just a little bit of a walkthrough of what Asana is. We're aware that, getting one set up can be a little bit daunting. So if this is something you're really interested in, then we're more than happy to set some time aside with you to help you set that up, or to even find a different platform that might suit your needs. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll put details in so that you can, get to, so we can organize a time to do that. Alrighty, cool. So the sprint.
Okay, so for this next part, we're going to be running through some of the types of activities that would typically occur within a sprint, just based on some of our own personal experiences in being involved in projects, as well as what are some effective ways to get the most and the best out of your team as well. Okay, so the very first thing is what's called a stand-up meeting. Now, I only knew about this like a short time ago myself, a couple of years ago. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to bring your team members, your fellow colleagues that are responsible for the different activities together to run through what are some of the key challenges that they're individually facing. Do they have any questions for yourself or for your fellow colleagues? And what are some of their upcoming priorities for the next sprint? So ideally, it would be no more than 10 minutes. So it's kind of like a rapid speed session. And it's generally face-to-face, but of course, we're online now. So you can definitely make it a little bit more engaging than you would typically presume with a stand-up meeting online. So even prior to, when Naeem has included a screenshot there, is, and hopefully you guys have heard of Padlet before, so it can be a wonderful way for people to also brainstorm things, but also provide anonymous kind of feedback as well, especially if it's a challenge that they don't feel comfortable talking about with the whole group. So typically for a stand-up meeting, you would have what's called a Scrum Master, which is kind of like your chair, and it's just the person that's responsible for facilitating the conversation and ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to contribute their perspectives as well. So one of the ways that you could ensure that, there's accountability diffused throughout all of the team is to even do it on a rotational basis. So give people the opportunity to, be the Scrum Master, and that might be a particular area and skills that they would like to develop as well, because, that's some wonderful leadership skills that you're developing. And you may want to share that Padlet prior to the stand-up meeting as well. But then also within the stand-up meeting, provide the opportunity for people to be adding some of their thoughts to as well. So Julia has very kindly shared with you a link to a Padlet. And then I might get, if it's okay, Naima, to facilitate this next section as well.
Yeah, so I guess we just wanted to, take this time also now, I'm aware that we've sort of already touched on a few of these questions, but might encourage you just to take these few minutes to just trial using this particular Padlet, particularly because we've actually set up some different features on this one. So you'll see that you can like certain comments, and you can also add to it. So you can add a comment to that particular post. And this is particularly useful in a meeting, potentially in this, what is a challenge you are facing or a question you have, because it allows people to be able to provide responses and potentially even solutions to those challenges. And particularly when you're trying to have a really short, succinct meeting for 10 minutes, it allows people, time outside of just talking to be able to reply to people's responses, and also something that people can go back to, because taking notes during meetings, although it's great, can sometimes there'll be things that get missed, and that's okay. Whereas here, you've got a physical thing that you can have to refer back to. And I guess the other thing that I also want to share is that when you're finished with that Padlet, you can save them as a PDF or as an Excel spreadsheet, so that you've got that kind of saved in an offline environment. And so, yeah, feel free to add to this, what is the challenge you're currently facing? And also to flag that that UQ actually has a license for Padlet, which means that you can get a free account with Padlet, like your own personal account, but usually you're limited to a certain number of boards. But under UQ, you can have not only unlimited boards, but it also means that there's a little bit more security with these boards, which I guess in the confines of projects can be really great to have that bit more security, so that that it's just your own. The other thing that's really useful, which you can do, is also personalize the end of the URL. So rather than having like a random splur of letters and numbers, you can personalize it so that it's easy to refer back to. And so, yeah, usually we would take this time, but I'm really aware that we're a little bit short for time at the moment. But we'll send through in an in the email afterwards some instructions on how to get access to the UQ versions. And obviously, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you, Naima. And yeah, so I think in terms of Padlet, it kind of provides a little bit more of a safe space, especially if people don't feel comfortable expressing, you know, some of the key challenges that they're facing, you know, verbally as well. But it's also a wonderful opportunity to identify some common themes. So if people are actually, you know, finding the same challenges as well, because especially it has features where, you know, people can heart it or people can comment on it as well. So those are just some of the pros of utilizing that platform.
Yeah. Oh, and also just in terms of the heart, you can change that as well. Like it doesn't have to just be a heart. I think you can also, in terms of reactions, you can make it just an upwards or a downwards vote. You can allow people to have star ratings or even a numeric score rating a post, which is something that it may be really useful for other activities as well.
I love that. That is amazing. Thank you for that hot tip. Okay, so another key thing that, you know, typically occurs during a project is actually to be evaluating the impact of what you actually produced at the end. And I would say, especially, you know, in the workplace, this is something that's really, really important, no matter, you know, if you're in the higher education industry or, you know, if you're beyond in other industries as well. But it's a great opportunity for you to actually measure the impact of what you've done. So if you've created, you know, resources, if you've created a program, did it actually make a difference and did it achieve what you wanted it to achieve? It's also kind of, sorry to skip through, but it's connected to sometimes even securing future funding. So projects are, you know, inherently short-term exercises, whether it be a year or 3 years or however long. And is there the need for a next phase of the project, or did you, you know, achieve some fantastic outcomes that you would never have foreseen, but there's still so much more space and room to grow as well. So it doesn't need to become part of what the business or the university does as part of their, you know, base operations as well. So, and that type of evidence is really critical to ensuring that you have that business case. But then also it's a fantastic opportunity to be closing the feedback loop. So for instance, if you're eliciting the feedback from, you know, students and staff about, you know, did it make a difference? If you're evaluating that and then providing high level recommendations based on areas where the program or the resources could be improved or how it's made a difference, it's really important to be ensuring that you then say to and highlight to people that you've listened and these are the recommendations that you would take into account as well.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of like how we can evaluate the project, we've sort of put down a few different examples, such as, you know, taking a baseline measure. You know, sometimes if you're implementing something, it can be really useful to take a baseline measure of what was it like before, you know, that intervention or that new thing. And if you're lucky, maybe you have that opportunity to do a survey or a focus group or collect other, you know, baseline physical measures. But sometimes that is impossible. And so sometimes that baseline measure can be as simple as like doing an audit of what's already in the space. So a really good example of that is this project management workshop. So we did a bit of a look at what workshops were available at UQ, and we couldn't, you know, find anything around online project management. And it's something that we were really keen to, you know, produce for our own partnership projects. And so we didn't really, but the thing is we didn't really have the time to really reach out to our partners to go, hey, is this something that you want? And so I guess our simple baseline measure was taking the audit of, well, there was nothing in this space. And so we've now implemented something and we'll, you know, see how effective that was. And I guess that's sort of, you know, these next stages of taking note of those that are engaging the outcome. And that might just be simply taking note of the numbers of, you know, how many people went along to that workshop, you know, where did, you know, what were they, how many students, how many staff, maybe their demographics, if that's relevant. And that can be useful, but I guess that next level that gets an even deeper feedback is the asking feedback for those from the community of those that engaged. And I guess we'll touch on this a little bit later, but you know, this asking for feedback really allows you to, I guess, get that lived experience impact, which, you know, really can help showcase how important it was, like your project, or what outcomes were came from it. And I guess those things can really help to support that case of helping secure for future funding about why should it matter that this still exists. So
Oh, sorry. So there are a few different ways that you can collect feedback as well. And just to note that this isn't an exhaustive list. So one of them is surveys. So two key platforms that we have experienced in the past and at the moment is SurveyMonkey. So generally it's free if you have under 10 questions. And then I think it has a cap of maybe about 40 or so respondents as well. But there's also Qualtrics, and one of the exciting things that the team came across a short time ago is that UQ currently has a license for students and staff. So it's, again, because it's licensed with UQ, it's more secure, especially if you're eliciting kind of sensitive information, whether it be student numbers or email addresses as well. But then also you don't have to pay for it, which is fantastic. And that can be a wonderful way to also be eliciting people's feedback and incorporating a blend of, you know, those short and longer term qualitative response questions, but then also some quantitative type information, whether it be like those Likert scales of 1 to 5 rating satisfaction levels. So it's really important to have a bit of a blend of all those different types. But then back to what Naima said in terms of that whole you know, that baseline is also, you know, capturing demographic information. So what types of people are actually filling in this survey as well is quite important. Focus groups are also another incredible way to elicit feedback from stakeholders or from students and staff. But of course, now we're in the environment where we have to do that online. So Zoom can be a good way to do that. One of the things that I would really flag is to be really security conscious, because we are aware that a lot of people throughout the sector at the moment, Zoom bombing is a real thing. So to ensure that when you're spreading the word out there about any focus groups or sessions that you're running with people, to ensure, you know, simple things that it's password protected and that you're not publicly sharing the link as well. But focus groups are a wonderful way to get more of that kind of rich data that surveys don't always give you as well, because it enables you as the facilitator of the focus group to be able to probe people's answers as well, especially if they've just replied yes or no, actually understand the why behind it. And then it's also really important to, like, how do you get the word out there? And social media is a really powerful platform as well. Even, you know, one of the things Naima said actually earlier in a meeting today is the importance of leveraging the existing networks and frameworks that have already been developed. So for instance, if a school or a faculty, for instance, has a thriving Instagram page or a Facebook page, maybe collaborate with the administrators of that page and try and get some posts out there to spread the word about this focus group that you're running as well. And then also, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be super quick, but we've run through Padlet and Jamboard, and it can be actually really effective to integrate activities that utilize these platforms into your focus groups as well. And it can be a great way to capture people's, especially if you've got larger focus groups and people might be a little bit more shy, and it provides that anonymity as well if people want to provide feedback. So you might pose a couple of questions in the focus group, you know, at some particular juncture, and it might be things as simple as, you know, what are some of the key challenges that you're facing as a student with online learning today, for instance. And so people might provide some feedback, and then you can identify, okay, what are some of the key trends that keep on emerging as well?
So I guess when we're collecting feedback, I guess there's just some really important tips that are useful for collecting feedback. So the first one around being open and transparent, particularly about how the data will be used. So for example, is it for continuous improvement, internal reporting, or is it going to be for like external, things such as conferences or for research purposes? And if that's the case, what ethics clearance have you, got through? And also like who will have access to that data, acknowledging, which members will be of the team may be accessing it, just so that people are aware of how their data will be used. And, you can even do this, doesn't have, it can be like a really short and sweet sort of way. You don't have to, go through every single like detail of, in this team meeting on the 7th of May at 1 p.m, we will be having a team meeting. It can, as long as you're just being open and transparent about who it will be. And I guess leading into that of who can participants contact if they have any questions. So if they've got questions about how it's going to be used or who's got access to that data, have they got somebody that they can contact so that they can, make sure that, that they're comfortable or can answer any of those questions that they have, or just even interpretations of questions. And I guess particularly highlighting it with this in the use of social media. Sometimes social media already have really great feedback tools such as polls on Facebook, even on Instagram stories. We've been seeing some people utilizing Instagram story polls and things like that to get feedback, which is a great way to quickly get feedback from people already engaged on those platforms. But you may want to consider an option if people want to remain anonymous. Social media can be a daunting place being a public platform. And so acknowledging that, if people want to remain anonymous, maybe you have a separate survey link, or encouraging them to message you rather than having to post on a public forum. Something that I think I'm very passionate about is in terms of when do you organize these activities or these feedback points. And something that can be really useful is to go to where people are already engaged. So for students, they are already engaged in activities like lectures and tutorials. And so if it's appropriate, is it possible to integrate, those quick surveys or even quick focus group questions into those activities? Or, if you're working with industry, are there places where you're already engaging together and can integrate that? Because I guess at the moment, I'm sure we're all aware of, people being bombarded with emails and survey links, and it can be really challenging to keep on top of them all and even want to engage. And so it makes it one step easier if it's already integrated into a place where you're engaging. And then, as I guess we keep on saying, is closing that feedback loop. Let participants know about how that feedback has been used and what impacts are being changed. Because when people know how their feedback is being used, they're more likely to engage that next time that you ask for feedback. So moving into, I guess, a bit of a different space is, when you're kind of coming towards the end of a sprint, or you've got a meeting coming up, maybe with a stakeholder or, gatekeepers, or even just like a really big team meeting. It can be really, I guess, hard to make sure that you have a really efficient team meeting. And so I guess one thing that we encourage to do is to create a meeting agenda. And something that we've been recently doing is, hang on, let me find my notes, is to actually use a Google Doc for our meeting agendas, as well as our meeting minutes. And so I guess the beauty of an agenda is that it really makes it clear to people about, what we're going to be chatting about in that meeting, but it also allows everyone from the team meeting to contribute to it. So by putting out a call, a week before that meeting for items for that agenda, allows people to go, yep, I want to talk about, collaborating on this, or I want to talk about, getting ideas for the next event. And you can make a time and a space to have that meeting. And if you get a flood of items, maybe it's worth having the conversation of, do we need a longer meeting? Do we need to have 2 meetings? And allows, I guess, to be really transparent about, the size of the meeting and, you know, making sure that you can make the most of it. And so this is, you know, just a Google Doc, and I can chuck in the link if you're wanting to go along to the page. But essentially, the main parts are, you know, making sure you've got clear up the top, you know, all just those really general notes about when it was, what time it was, where, you know, what was it about, and who went, and also who wasn't able to go. Because this means that, you know, you can be really transparent about keeping those people in the loop if they weren't able to make it to that meeting. And so I guess to highlight, you know, some of the important other parts of an agenda is, I guess, always starting off with a bit of a welcome and a, you know, acknowledging those apologies so that everyone's sort of aware of who's in this space, particularly in an online environment. If you've got a lot of people in a Zoom meeting, it can be hard to see everyone that's there and maybe who's not there. And then it also makes it really clear about, you know, the structure of what's being talked about. And then if you want to, you can add, you know, you can add your notes directly. And if you're sharing it as a Google Doc, it means that, or another collaborative platform, you know, you could be using, I think Microsoft have an online, you know, Word document where people can collaborate together too. But it means that you can add your notes together, which can, and kind of share that responsibility of taking the minutes. A really good example was earlier this week, we had a broader team meeting. And although it was, you know, one of my responsibilities was to be taking minutes, it meant that, you know, when I was speaking, because it's really hard to take notes and speak at the same time, it meant that somebody else could jump in and take notes for that section. And also take, you know, be able to add in notes when maybe I just haven't put enough detail in. So by having that in a collaborative space means that everyone can be part of that. And I guess finally, following up after a meeting. So once you've had that meeting and you've got all of those notes, close that loop with your team and send through, you know, a link to that document or an overview of the notes that were taken. And also to put, you know, what were the action items in. So a really good, one simple practice is to add a table in that email of, you know, the actions coming up, who's responsible, and maybe some deadlines that you're looking to achieve. And that just helps to close that loop after a meeting so that everyone's on the same page. And also to include those people who couldn't make it. So this means that they're able to kind of brief over what the meeting was about and can also send through any thoughts if they need to follow things up. Alrighty, cool. So you've just done that hard leg of the project and you're coming towards the end. And I guess it's important to reflect now about how do you tie the bow? Because tying the bow can be difficult sometimes, particularly, you know, when you've got all these extra things that keep on popping up. And so we're going to step through a few different things, such as, you know, what do you do after you finish that project and looking at evaluation?
Okay. So one of the key things that I think is always really important to do once you're finishing and finalizing a project is to develop a final report, and for that final report to be co-created as well. And so especially if you're having something like a retrospective meeting where you're bringing together your teammates, and if you have stakeholders, your stakeholders as well, it's really important for you to all kind of reflect upon what were some of the key challenges, how could you improve your communications or your collaborations better in the future as well? Because that can be a wonderful opportunity to be informed about, you know, for your next project, what could you actually do differently to be more effective? But then also to reflect on what you actually produced. And so to have a think about that very first ideation team meeting that you had. And even, you know, if you had a Jamboard, like pull up that Jamboard and refer back to it and go, okay, what did we actually create in the end? And it might have been less than what you actually hoped to achieve. And I think that's a really important thing to reflect upon as well. Because I think one of the key things I've learned about myself in the past is that I can get really excited by all of these ideas, but it's actually not humanly possible to achieve all of these wonderful things. So one of the things I've learned in the past is yes, to have these ideation spaces, but then to step away and then to think about, okay, what is actually achievable in this 6-month period of time as well. So to temper my expectations as well. But then also you might have gone in different directions, and that is completely fine as well. And I think especially if you have stakeholders involved, it can be a really powerful opportunity for them as well, because they can actually see and reflect upon, you know, how they were actually involved in the process. And when I had a previous retrospective report, the stakeholders had said it was the most engaged that they had ever felt in a project, because they actually saw how their ideas were actually implemented throughout the process as well. But then I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be incorporating elements of celebration as well, and acknowledging the wonderful work of your teammates and your stakeholders who got the project to where it was, because no project is ever achieved alone. And then so once you have that meeting, then compiling a report, and it might be something, you know, like Naima mentioned earlier, where during the meeting you're actually writing in a Google Doc all of the comments and the feedback that people have, and then polishing it off and then disseminating that report with everyone that was at the meeting as well, so that they can see that their insights were also included. We've just got a question: can one study these materials for PMP exams? I'm not too sure. Do you know what that means, Naima or Julia?
You know what? I'm not sure what a PMP exam is. Do you mind in the comments, John, putting a little bit more detail about that? That'd be great.
That'd be amazing. And in the meantime, I'll go into the next one, which is, it's really important. So say, for instance, you've created this wonderful video or this wonderful website. How do you actually get the word out there as well? And so it's really important to draw upon your networks, and to, in that final meeting, for instance, even talk about how you're actually going to get the word out there. Are you going to be utilizing social media campaigns? Is someone going to be responsible for drafting up the communication strategy and plan, and, you know, sample resources for your colleagues to then share, you know, to spread the word about everything that you've created. And then finally, with respect to change management, and it's always really specific depending on the context. So I'll just provide a really quick illustrative example of that. Was when I was finishing in a position, we had finished the project and we had created all of these resources, a website, as well as all of these videos and online content. But I was actually leaving to go to another university. So with stuff like that, I mean, you can't have, as you know, a website that just remains static and doesn't change and doesn't grow and develop. So we had to come up with a plan for when I left, who was actually going to take stewardship of that website, who was going to make the changes, and who was going to be the new person that would have sign off for any edits or amendments that were made. And what were some ideas that even I had with respect to future directions where the project could go as well. And it's really important to map all of that within your final report about future directions, so that, you know, if there's someone else coming in and they weren't involved in the project at the very beginning, they can understand the broader context, but then can also draw upon some of your expertise in terms of the next steps for the project. So I'm just going to the chat to read John's question. Can one study these materials for project management professional exam?
So I guess, and then my first thought is, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I guess, you know, we've developed these materials just based upon our own personal experiences of project management. So I don't know how they would align with that exam material. Is perhaps something that I just flag.
Yeah. So maybe definitely reach out to your course coordinator or your tutor as well, just to confirm if that's, you know, if it's suitable, because of course we wouldn't be aware of the assessment rubrics and so forth. But in terms of like the resources that we're going to be sharing with you, you know, they're freely available in terms of we're always happy to share it, and don't feel confined to them as well. So if you want to change around tables or you know, add your own thoughts to as well, please feel free to. I know that in my first job, I would have really appreciated these resources, so I'm happy for others to utilize them as well. So finally, to ensure that we practice, before you go into that link, I'll just give you a little bit of context. So to ensure that we practice what we preach, we would absolutely love your feedback on ways that we could improve this workshop. So what worked well, what didn't work well, and what could we do differently? Or you might have some fantastic ideas and resources that you think should be included within this workshop. So we have a Qualtrics survey. Hopefully it's not too painful. We'll give you about 5 minutes to complete it if that's okay. But one thing that I want to flag is you'll notice in the survey that there is purple text as well. And it just includes a few prompts and a little bit of descriptors as well that may be useful for you. Naeem is just kindly going to bring it up now for you. But basically we wanted to say that, you know, you in your future, you may be working on a project and want to incorporate evaluation, which I always highly recommend. And it's always difficult when you're first, you know, when you're having to create something from scratch, a survey from scratch. So please feel free to even utilize this as a template and change around the questions as well. So feel free not only to provide us with feedback, which we would love, but also to use this as a template if you're creating a survey as well. Was there anything else, Naima, that you wanted to add to that description?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, so you're kind of, as you'll see on the screen, you know, little bits in purple. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of tips, and there is a whole wealth of ones out there. But if you do ever have any questions about how to, you know, set something up or want any other tips, like please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Or even if you just want another spare pair of eyes to quickly read over it. I know I in the past have appreciated having somebody else look over a survey before I hit send, even just for checking of spelling errors, and also to see if there's any other way. So yeah, we might give you guys 5 minutes just to have a read through that and to fill out that responses. We'd love your feedback, and yeah, we'll be we've been taking this feedback on iterative process as well, even in these current workshops. So we've run this is the 3rd time, and have even made changes, you know, even in these just 3 sessions based on the feedback we've received.
So yeah, so we'll give you 5 minutes. We'll check in 4 minutes and just give you a 1 minute wrap up as well. But then also if you wanted to provide more substantive feedback and you don't have enough time, even feel free to complete the evaluation after this workshop as well.
Alrighty, might just give one more minute before we get back into the last few slides. So thank you so much again for taking the time to do that. Also, for any of those that are watching the recording, feel free to head over to the survey as well. We'll make sure that there's an option for you if you want to leave any feedback, and we'll check in and hopefully be able to improve future offerings for this even from a recording. So if for those of you that haven't had a chance to finish it, feel free just to keep it aside for now and fill it out in your spare time. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that, because we do really take this feedback really seriously, and it really does impact and influence, how we run these workshops in the future. And so I guess as we sort of were talking about, tying the bow on projects, Mads kind of talked about it before, but really about taking some time out, about the importance of taking time to reflect and debrief about the project, and not just as a team, but also individually, because this really, going through a project, you learn lots of things along the way, go through, different challenges, and all by taking the time to debrief and reflect upon it means that you can improve or change how you interact in future projects. So you may be able to use things that you found to be really useful in a previous project and input them into a future project. And so we've just put some questions up there about what are some things that you could debrief about. So as a team, it might be, looking back at what the original plan was and what did you end up achieving, and acknowledging those challenges and how did you overcome them, and could those tools be useful in future projects, or even being able to, not have that challenge in the first place. And I guess having that open space about, what could we have done differently, and I guess hindsight, can be such a useful tool, and although, it doesn't change how things went, can definitely influence how we do things in the future. And I guess also, as I was saying, having that time for individual reflection. So what will you do in, what will you do in future projects differently? and what is one area or skill that you want to continue to learn about and develop. And I guess also taking the time of, you know, during that project, what is something that you were proud of? You know, was it a particular outcome that you achieved, or was it simply, you know, one team meeting that you were really stoked about the way that you facilitated it, or a particular task that you felt like you aced? And I think taking that time to acknowledge, you know, those things that did go really well, and be proud of yourself for that. And so I'm really aware of the time, but I guess, you know, if we have time, it would be great if you could quickly jump over to our final Jamboard and add to it. What is, I think the question is, what is one thing you want to continue to learn about? And so if you can get a chance to join in, join this Jamboard, and just to add a sticky note about, for you, now that you've had this 2 hours of all this information of project management, new tools, new strategies, what is something that you want to continue to learn about in your own work? Awesome. Cool. And if you do want to learn more about how to create surveys with Qualtrics, we'll be sending out those links onto how to get access to it. But of course, if you have any other further questions, like, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. How to create amazing social media posts. I also want to learn how to do that. And yeah, we've been playing around with Canva recently as a useful tool, which you can also get a, thanks Julia, you can get a free account on Canva, which is also a really useful tool for creating social media posts if you're interested. Alrighty, 3 minutes on the clock. I might head back over to our final slides. How to be a complete project. How to effectively create your project group. Yeah, creating a project team can be really, you know, quite a skill, and I think that's something that I'm still learning myself. So to kind of wrap up, as we, you know, we often talk about, you know, closing that feedback loop. We wanted to finish off this workshop with, I guess, what are our action items? So for you guys, we'll be sending, what we'll be doing is sending you an email with all of these links and resources that we've been speaking about today, including the slides, as well as 2 handouts, which kind of gives a bit of a brief overview of the tools and the strategies that we've been using today. And so for you guys, we would recommend, you know, referring to those handouts, and also to reach out to us if you have any questions. And I guess the other things that we'll be doing is reviewing your feedback. And I guess after that, we'll be sending out a "you said we will do," which is one way that we use, one strategy that we use to close the feedback loop, to acknowledge all of the feedback that we've received, and to let you know about how we're going to action that, or to explain, you know, what we're going to be doing instead. So once we've got the recording, we will be sending that to all of the people that engaged with the project management workshops over the last couple of weeks. And so hopefully we'll receive that, you know, next week sometime. Cool. So I guess, thank you. I guess one last thing I might want to add is, so we're just a small team over in the Student Employability Centre, actually running general workshops. Traditionally isn't under our role, but we got really excited about being able to share this workshop with the broader community. And so that extension goes out to you guys to reach out to us if you ever have any questions. But also, if you want to learn more about the Student Staff Partnership Initiative, essentially these are the projects that bring together students and staff to collaborate together on projects that enhance the UQ experience. So we've had projects such that enhance learning resources, so students and staff collaborating together to co-design new learning resources or learning activities. Might be really appropriate in this online environment, how to bring students and staff together to co-design maybe, you know, things in semester 2. And other projects like co-designing. One project that I was as a student was co-designing a mentoring program for students in the faculty. So if you're interested in finding about how you can utilize these skills in the initiative, let us know. And also just, yeah, reach out to us if you have any questions. And thank you so much for joining us. Mads, Julia, anything else to add?
Just, yes, to thank everyone for joining us. It was lovely to kind of see you today, and to reiterate what Naima said. You know, we're always happy to answer any questions that you may have, or we would even love to hear of, you know, any wonderful resources that you've been working on or platforms that you've been working on. Julia has also shared the link to our website as well, if you want more information, as well as our email address, which the three of us share. But the three of us might stick around for the next couple of minutes too, if anyone has any other questions, but we completely understand that we're all very busy too and have lots of places to run off to.
Yeah. And for those that are watching the recording, that extension, you know, that offer goes out to you guys if you're watching this recording. So don't hesitate to get in contact with us. And on that note, I might stop the recording.